Hey guys, what is going on? Chris here with Shughead Gaming, bringing you my review for Space Junkies, developed by Ubisoft. And while this is currently available on various PC VR platforms, this review will of course be on the PSVR version and reviewed on a PS4 Pro. Space Junkies releases March 26, 2019 for an estimated price of $40. Of course, that depends on your region. Space Junkies is a visceral jetpack-fueled VR arcade shooter where you fly through deadly orbital arenas in hostile space, facing off in extreme battles across different modes and maps. Space Junkies brings AAA production quality to a VR multiplayer shooter via Ubisoft, but does this shooter belong in rotation next to the likes of Firewall Zero Hour? Let's find out. Guys, if you like this video, please hit that like button, and if you'd like to see more PSVR content from me, please consider subscribing. As always, let's kick things off with a look at graphics. Coming from Ubisoft, you would expect Space Junkies to look good. And it does. Everything here from the menus and lobbies to the actual gameplay levels themselves all shine with a polish and care that in many cases only money can buy. The overall visual look of the game world is richly colored with a nice level of detail and some very impressive lighting effects. Special mention to some of the shadow effects where I could see my floating shadow literally 100 feet below me as I glided over top of a level hunting for my next victim. No mention of whether Pro support is baked in here, but as is, the overall visuals and resulting draw distance is fantastic with some pretty strong anti-aliasing in effect. This does give part of the arenas a softer look, but it's never to the level of Firewall Zero Hour's level blur, and it retains much of the expected detail. Some levels can get pretty large, so when hunting high and low for ranged targets, I appreciated the game's highlight system that made even tiny dots in the horizon targetable. Texture detail up close can be a bit hit or miss, as you can see that Ubisoft made some optimization choices, often keeping detail in closed-in man-made type areas slightly more detailed, while leaving rock and plant-based surfaces a lot more simple and blurred. The overall combination works fantastic though, for once in motion, you can't tell anyways. Weapons and gadgets also get the polish you would expect with nice models and detailed animations. I particularly enjoyed the floating cases as I fired off the minigun in 0G. Another special mention to the inclusion of the muchly appreciated fully animated body. Body rendering is fantastic, coming off like a next level version of what we saw in Electronauts, and really sells the immersion level. Points deducted though for not having free moving arms and the ability to sign with your hands, but more on that later. All in all, a very impressive and polished package from the Ubisoft France team, bringing high-end VR with fast movement and loads of lighting effects to not only PSVR, but cross-platform. Sound is up next. Again, as you would expect, the audio offering presented here is also top-notch. Music is limited to basically the menu music, but it's an earwormer, so be warned. Outside of that, love it or hate it, Space Junkies has opted to forego music while in gameplay. This isn't to say you can't bring in some Spotify, but here the focus is on the tactical necessity of listening for incoming attackers. Attacks way in the distance disappointingly seem to drop off sound-wise, but if you can hit them, you can hear them. So listening for a teammate in a firefight or an opponent boosting towards you from behind can often be crucial for winning matches. The 3D audio mix is above average, and while it's not as alive as I might have hoped, it still works fantastic for isolating incoming targets, far outperforming the position-based audio found in Firewall Zero Hour. Weapon sounds are likewise well done, but not reference level. Sounds are varied across weapons, detailed, and are appropriately sci-fi sounding, but I couldn't help but thinking they lacked a bit of punch in the sound mix, making them at times come off slightly tame. Outside of the gun sounds, sound effects are all top-notch with explosions and jet boosts all coming together to fill the soundscape. Of course, we will just overlook the fact that there really shouldn't be any sound in space at all. Special mention to the inside of the helmet sounds, providing a touch of realism with the sound of your character breathing that elevates depending on your level of activity. Don't worry, this is never overdone or irritating, but it was very cool to survive a frantic firefight and hear my character breathing heavily, matching my own level of adrenaline. Finally, voice work is again okay, with the commentator spouting out well-recorded but cheesy dialogue. I did, however, enjoy the option to swap between the excited and flamboyant default and change to a drill sergeant style. And speaking of voice, as you will undoubtedly find yourself teamed up with another player, I should mention the welcomed inclusion of in-game chat. When in the lobbies, all 4 players can communicate, but this is altered when entering a game and dependent on team sorting. And even more welcomed as Space Junkies is cross-platform with PC VR headsets, and it was cool to be able to chat across multiple platforms as one happy VR family. And that brings us to gameplay. First things first, this is a strictly online co-op shooter. For better or for worse, there is absolutely no single-player content. That means no bots, no training area, nothing. So if single-player gaming is your jam, Space Junkies is not the game for you. If, however, a combination of Starblood Arena, Downward Spiral Horus Station, and the classic Unreal Tournament series is what you're looking for, then welcome to Space Junkies. Right after finishing the mandatory tutorial, you will be given the option of choosing between Quick Match, Team Play, and Private Match. Quick Match will likely be the main draw here, as it will put you into an open lobby and attempt to fill it with another 3 players. As long as 2 players are in the lobby, voting on one of the 6 current levels commences and the match is started. Modes are randomly rotated and consist of Team Deathmatch, Free-for-All, Duel, and King Mode. And of course, these are across 1v1 or 2v2 depending on the player count in the lobby. As Space Junkies is cross-platform between PSVR, HTC Vive, Oculus Rift, and Windows Mixed Reality, finding players should not be an issue. In addition, lobbies appear to be stable and server hosting is done by Ubisoft, so no dropped matches due to host migration. For players looking to play with friends, look to Team Play or Private Match. Gameplay here is very reminiscent of the previously released Starblood Arena, so it's interesting that we see this game launch on the eve of Starblood Arena's servers closing in June. However, unlike Starblood Arena, combat here in Space Junkies is less acrobatic, always keeping up as up, down as down, and more in line with the movement in Downward Spiral. However, unlike Downward Spiral, combat is fast and fluid and often feels like a VR reimagining of Unreal Tournament, but with a lot more verticality and in 0G. Movement speed is quick but never blistering so, and again very similar to Starblood Arena. At 6 levels, content here is a bit on the anemic side of things, so hopefully the promised flow of free content in the form of new maps and modes comes sooner than later. Of the 6 maps on offer, 4 feel very reminiscent of the small to mid-sized maps found in Starblood Arena, with the last 2 maps going big and open, allowing for some truly long-ranged combat. Thankfully, all the maps are well designed and really lend themselves to team play, giving players enough room to strategize, but keeping things tense enough so that the small player count doesn't devolve into a game of hide and seek. Like the gameplay, respawns are quick and matches usually last about 10 minutes before bringing players back to the lobby to change loadouts, open loot boxes, and ready up. Basically, Space Junkies plays like you would expect a AAA modern shooter to, so we're good. Speaking of loadouts, one aspect of the game I think is poorly communicated is the ability to go into the armory and swap out gadgets and allocate them to either L1 or R1. This gives the player the option of losing the standard shield and sword loadout and instead replaces them with such toys as hologram lures that look like your character, an EMP gun, and a replenishing health boost. More importantly, the armory is also where you can choose from a variety of character classes that mix up the primary stats of health and speed. The armory also serves as the main hub for changing out cosmetic items that are received from opening loot boxes that are obtained each time a player levels up. Cosmetics are actually pretty in-depth, covering guns, helmets, and suit skins. So the elephant in the room, and the factor that is certain to divide the community, is that of the controls. From someone who went from hating them and deleting the beta after only a few matches, I am now really enjoying myself, but that's not without reservation and some real issues with control design decisions here. First off, yes, it is DS4 only, so no to moves or aim control. As a title originally not planned to land on PSVR at all, Ubisoft claims this was the only way to make the cross-platform play competitive with PC VR headsets and their motion controllers armed with analog sticks. There's no getting around it, this sucks, and jumping in a game designed for dual wielding at times feels a little janky. To make matters worse, standard FPS controls are not an option, as here aiming is done by literally aiming the controller. Thankfully, after a few more matches, I accepted the fact that these were the controls I had to use, things did begin to click. Simply explained, L1 and L2 are your left hand, with R1 and R2 being your right hand. Bumpers pick up and drop weapons while triggers fire. When empty-handed, hitting either bumper will bring up that hand's allocated gadget. Some two-handed weapons like the RPG or the shotgun can be dual-wielded, but they require both hands to reload, so some finesse will be required if you want to attempt this. Honestly, I only ran into one example where the DS4 proper screwed me, and that was when using the shield. For PSVR, the shield really can only be used on its own. You can certainly arm a single handgun in your opposite hand, but unless you're firing at someone off to your side, you will end up shooting behind your own shield and actually destroying it. So yeah, that doesn't work like it does on PC, where you can free arm around the shield. Some will complain about aiming straight down or up with the DS4, but with proper camera placement, I can tell you I had zero issues. I do, however, recommend keeping your arms slightly extended out for easier free movement when aiming down. Will we get moves patched in? I don't know. Unfortunately, controllers aren't the end of my issues with control choices. The mandatory click turning and the lack of an invert option for the Y-axis also made it high on my list of issues, with the former being actually less of an issue about immersion here and more about the inability to turn fast enough when reacting to attackers. If anything has changed with the controls, smooth turning and turning speed control needs to be first, as this is the same issue for PC VR players, except they can turn 360 degrees in the real world to compensate. Well, I know it sounds like I'm pretty down on the game. Surprisingly, I really did adapt and was in fact able to get competitive against PC players. Team matches in particular were a blast, as my teammate and I talked strategy as we wiped team after team, thus really showing what Space Junkies can be when it's at its best. Weapon variety was acceptable, as was the various modes, but what I would like to see is the game as a whole fleshed out a bit more. Space Junkies is a fantastic foundation for a true esports shooter in VR, but it lacks any skill or weapon progression, no ability to choose a given mode when playing in open lobbies, a real lack of maps, and of course a complete absence of any single player content. Space Junkies can easily be played either sitting or standing, with a minimum amount of room required. Motion sickness could be an issue for some due to the fast and frantic nature of the gameplay. However, optional blinders are available, along with the ability to turn the helmet on to simulate the feeling of actually having your head in a space helmet. And finally, that brings us to fun factor and my final review. Yes, I have issues with the control choices here. Yes, I think the game lacks content. But even with all that, I actually found myself having the most fun I've had in a VR shooter since Firewall Zero Hour. Space Junkies is AAA quality and super polished top to bottom, in a way that we rarely see in these early days of VR. As such, Ubisoft should be commended, but it still needs work. I hate number ratings and instead rate games on a basis of buy, wait for a sale, or burn it to the ground. Space Junkies at $40 American is priced about the same as Firewall Zero Hour. It delivers half the maps but 3 times the game modes. It's a more polished game than Firewall, but suffers from some shitty control designs. And for those that care, the level up system provides a plethora of cosmetic choices. So is it a buy? Ugh. I'm actually pretty torn with Space Junkies. It has some real issues and a lack of maps, but I also found myself having a lot of fun and even more as I got better, giving me that just one more match feeling. Part of me says, nope, fix it before I buy it. But at the same time, a game of this quality and polish from a major studio should be supported to encourage future games and more immediately continued growth of Space Junkies itself. At the end of the day, I think if you're willing to work with the controls and you're a fan of multiplayer shooters, it's a buy. For some, this game simply isn't for you. But if it is, and you're hung up on this game's issues, be heard. Go to Twitter, Reddit, and Facebook and tell Ubisoft you want it, but you want more. Anyways, guys, that's it for me. If you like this video, please hit that like button. And if you'd like to see more PSVR content from me, please consider subscribing. And for video updates, hit that bell icon. I'll catch you guys on my next video.